If there was that aha moment, that big realization that CSATs create for their clients that makes sobriety easier. It kind of opens that gate to recovery where it's like, living in a different way doesn't seem like this mythical adventure as much as it's a almost what you feel, called to do. What is that aha moment for you, for clients? And then what are 2 or 3 different ways that you can help our listeners try to achieve that, either with their CSAT or independently in their recovery journey?
The real big thing, the really great challenge, so simple but yet so difficult, is really when there is the beginning of the willingness to get honest. That is really, to me, one of the biggest, most important things. The one thing I think that's important to note is you can get honest before you necessarily get sober. Sometimes people will reverse that and they think, well, I have to be in perfect shape before I can get honest. And generally, it doesn't work like that very well at all. It really is that's part of the process, is getting honest and admitting that you're struggling and admitting you're doing these things that are harmful to yourself. And if you have a partner, of course, very much to them as well.
I'm going to ask you for 1, 2, or 3 kind of suggestions, but I'm going to interject and just say, it's a realization I wish I had in my own addiction journey earlier, because to your point, Brad, you almost delay recovery until sobriety. It's almost like, I need to achieve sobriety first and then recovery. Can you speak to a couple, if you can, a couple things that someone can do in recovery or when working with their CSAT to work towards that point? How do they shift that mindset around, the difference between sobriety and recovery? Or are they different? Or should they completely change their mindset around it altogether?
So what I'm looking at, one of the things I look at is the blocks. What are the blocks from getting honest? What are the things that make people think otherwise, that getting honest isn't necessarily like such an important thing? It's that I need to do other things first. So kind of my perspective on that is a few different things. Fear of consequences, feeling alone in this process, feeling disconnected, and this really inaccurate belief of my partner will be more hurt by this information. So it's better if I protect her or protect them from these harms. And I just need to work on getting better, kind of secretly, behind the scenes. And that just really doesn't work. It doesn't work for you. It doesn't work for them. And it's really, these are all, a lot of them are really very inaccurate beliefs. The partner being more hurt by the info than by having things hidden from them. That's kind of one of the biggest problems I see. And as gallant and as heroic as it might seem, I'm going to protect her from these harms. Honestly, it's too late to do that, because you're already in the middle of harming your partner. So you can't really hide from that, and you don't benefit them or yourself from keeping things hidden. Keeping things hidden makes the addict grow. I don't know, I guess the addict is kind of like a mushroom or something. It grows really well in the dark. And you really need to get it out into the light, openness, honesty, in a safe way. And definitely working with your therapist is quite essential. You don't want to just come and blurt everything out in the middle of dinner or while you're on a trip in the middle of, you're having fun and you're having a hike and, oh, honey, I just wanted to tell you something. So you really need to do it in a way that's safe for you and safe for them. So I very much encourage anybody in that place where they really need to get help from someone to do it the right way.
Yeah, you look. I appreciate you bringing that up. I remember reading Rob's book and him mentioning, the people who skip they when they first hear the idea of a therapeutic disclosure, this concept of telling someone the truth therapeutically, and having it be this a fairly in the scheme of things, it's not a long process, but to the addict, it can seem like a very long process. But to your point, it's the difference between looking like an asshole and a cheater versus somebody who has a mental illness. And if it's presented, if it's not presented therapeutically, you do look like an asshole or a stereotypical cheater. Whereas to your point, when it's created in a therapeutic container, the way Rob writes it, it's really interesting. It's like, you share it that way, and then they just up and leave. Oh, well, you're an asshole. Bye. And then that's kind of the end of the discussion. And there's nothing there. I think what I always encourage men to think about when they're in that phase is, man, I'm still married to my wife and things are better. You hear stories about this, and they are true. The couples that do make it out of this are better than they ever were in the past. I know that's really hard to believe for addicts when they're really in it, but it is possible. But again, man, you could miss that entire opportunity when it's done, if it's done as an attempt to tell the truth. But again, without there's a way to frame it. And you, in order to get to that point of understanding, you do need the help of I don't even say a therapist. I would say a CSAT. I've seen a lot of therapists butcher this process really terribly, who are not certified sex addiction therapists. I would definitely say disclosure is not something that's not something to be done without your CSAT. If you do have a therapist that you like around trauma, that's fine. I would say do the disclosure piece with the CSAT, and then you can return back to your other therapist for the other aspects of therapy. But using a CSAT, you said something else that I want to get back to, and that is, in our program, we talk about it a lot because everybody in our retreats are high achievers. And image management is usually something that they adopted very, very young. I would say most of the men in our groups who are successful started practicing different forms of image management as young as 9-10 years old, and really started crafting a version of themselves that was advantageous when it became to being seen and perceived by others. Those skills are very, very valuable in a capitalist society. However, when it comes to recovery, to your point, when the truth has already been out and she's already been hurt, further controlling the image is one of the worst things you can do, because the truth's out. And so, and believe me, if you think you're going to get away with it, you ain't. They become very, very good at picking up on what is image management and what is not. Can you speak to that aspect of it? Because that's really what you're speaking to here is. Really, as long as you're creating a fabrication, and then you're going to go heal over here because you're like, hey, I'm not blatantly acting out anymore. So I'm just going to show her this. And then one day I'll catch up to that. Is that what you were speaking to? Because I hear that a lot, especially in our group, is like, why does she need to know?
Yeah. There's a lot of confusion about why does she need to know, and the image management. Yeah, that's really a huge thing. That can really get stuck deep into therapy, even where it's like, well, I can say these things and do these things with my group members and with you and my, my therapist, my group therapist, and or my individual therapist that's a CSAT. But I still need to put on these airs. I've had people even talk about how they need to have this perfect looking front. They also including with their children. And I mean, that's one of the things that really kind of gets to me as a therapist and as a father. I'm also a dad, is when they think they need to do this to their kids too. Like they need to put on this front, like there's nothing wrong and everything's great. And I'm like, but your kids can feel what's going on. I mean, yes, number one, you really need to get honest and real with your partner. But if you're living that lie, and acting like everything is just fine with your children, that also causes significant harm to them, because they can feel, maybe they can't see with their eyes, but they can feel through, no, there's bad stuff going on here. I know what's going on. I don't, I mean, they're not going to be able to tell you they know, unless of course they're older teenagers and maybe they did see some things and they did find out, but otherwise they're still going to be able to feel it. So that image management, that everything needs to look perfect and wonderful, is just really interfering. And it's so important for people to be able to pull apart, okay, if I have a job and I have a certain profession, I have a certain position, that I need to maintain a certain kind of appearance. I get that's true. That makes sense. Certainly higher positions are going to be more that way, but you need to be able to get home to your house with your family and get real.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to live that real
and
life.
What you're talking about there is the reason, you'll hear this, that addiction is runs in families, and even though there's not technically, there's debate, is there an addiction gene, is there not, there certainly hasn't been any studies, is there a sex addiction gene, or is there not, but again, I think from whether you believe that, whether you don't believe that, whether that's something's been, to me, it's an easier concept to understand. Addiction is about living a double life. And I would say when you're raised by someone who lives a double life, it leaves clues. To your point, when something's not quite right and you at home, it's not quite right. And then you and the kid, the same child, you're on the phone, and they're hearing these conversations. And then you go to the grocery store and the person from church asks, "Oh my gosh, how's the family?" And there's this fabricated, the face changes. I think that's the reason people don't understand. They won't find out that their father was a sex addict until years and years later. They share it with their mom, and it's like, "Oh yeah, your dad had a really big issue with pornography, and we had an affair early on in the relationship." That's the first time that you're hearing about this. And but again, that is, it's the subtle things. Was he commenting on a woman's breasts in front of your mom? Right. Oh, yeah. And it's, so it's these adoption of beliefs of, it doesn't matter how old you get or if you're married, you will still want women, and your wife will have to be okay with it. I mean, that's the belief that you start adopting when you see that behavior is, my dad still wants to have extramarital relations, but he can't. But he still wants to. My mom knows he wants to, right? It's a very small, subtle comment about an actress on television, but it's, as a child, when you're watching that, that's how addiction is passed on, as these beliefs accumulate. And then at a certain point, it's like, monogamy is an idea, and it's not, and it's unhuman, right? And the second that's there, and you have, and then you have sex as a regulation method, how bad is it really when monogamy is a construct, and then our human desires are actually othered? And that, to me, that's really, when I think back to my own personal story, it's those beliefs that are passed on to kids that open the window to using these actions and behaviors as a drug rather than as a relational connection or something. As long as monogamy is a construct, how important is it really? Do you see people addicts battle with this? The concept of, I want to have sex, what's wrong with that?
Oh yeah, very much. There's the battle. I always like to define it as there's really at least two of you that exist. There's the part of you that you like to show to people, and then there's the part of you that's the addict. And that addict part, it's, who are you feeding is what I like to kind of describe. Which wolf are you feeding? Are you feeding, the one that's healthy, that's good, that's also able to be real? Or are you feeding that monster side, that part that's got this insatiable feeling? And to speak I think it's a little bit of an area to speak to, is that insatiable part of you. And it's there. Um, it could be because you have addictions in your family. That's certainly one possibility, but trying to avoid dealing with reality, dealing with your feelings. A lot of people, if not maybe most people with addictions, really suffer from not being able to have a space to have their feelings growing up. And that is one of the contributing factors, I believe, that creates the addiction is I can't be open, I can't be real. In order for me to get to some place where I feel good, I have to create this kind of alternate place, this alternate world. And some of it may be a direct copy to a parent, or it may just be the general feeling like, well, sharing feelings isn't safe. So I have to go do these other things that help me feel good. I can't really just be open and share my feelings and be real. So that kind of loops back to the whole thing about being real, is usually people that can't feel like they can be themselves were raised to not feel like they can't be themselves. By experience, witnessing. Yeah.
Yeah. Humans feel things, right? And so to craft a world where you don't, or the feelings don't matter, dehumanizes yourself, which is a very, and I think it's something that is more dangerous than I think people realize, because within sex addiction, I think it's dangerous in all addiction when you dehumanize yourself, but I think it's extra dangerous in sex addiction, because when you dehumanize yourself, you dehumanize others. It's just, they go hand in hand, because if you're not a human, it now opens the door to dehumanizing another person. When the case of sex addiction, this can turn into other people. And then when they, now all of a sudden there's a disconnect, that this person on the other side of the computer screen is not a person, that the sex worker is not a person, that this woman that you're using for whatever you're using her for at the bar is not a person. And it's that, it's the dehumanization that makes all of this possible, because if you're just a person who is existing to be happy, and you don't really need to think about any sort of consequence after the decision, it opens up a really big door of possibilities. If that's what we're doing here, then all of a sudden I get, if that's all we are, then the concept of legacy doesn't matter. And so you don't see the consequences of, my other example of that is, when you're looking at the porn video, the view count says 51,784. That I believe, again, I haven't worked at those companies. My guess is, I don't even know how accurate those numbers are, but my guess would be is to remove the shame and to normalize that video. I'm curious if it really has 51,000 views, or if every view counts as 5 to make you feel like, oh, this is normal because there's 51,000 people who saw this. But it's that dehumanization that I've seen, and amongst high achievers, a lot of them are be like, oh, I don't know if I've dehumanized myself or not. Well, if you're only as good as how much you do and what you accomplish, then you're not a human anymore. You are essentially, an AI, right? Every day is a contest. How much can I get done today? And if I add all of these days up, will it be better than 99% of the rest of the population? And, I think the irony about being the best is everyone else has to be worse than you. And I think when high achievers really start dissecting their thought process, they have dehumanized themselves, and they've dehumanized others. They've created a game that, in my opinion, the more and more you study about addiction, if you look at somebody who's really bought into the successful male culture, it's a breeding ground for not just sex addiction, but all addictions. It is a very isolated, everyone's always trying to get to the top. The irony of the top is you're the only one up there. And in order to be better than everyone, they have to be worse than you, and you have to stay better than them. And I don't think a lot of high achievers put two and two together, but it's lonely up there. And if they can't join you, because if they were to join you, then now there's two of you, and that's now a threat to your agenda. You're essentially playing a game of loneliness, which it is. To me, it's a game of isolation. And that's when you were talking about when you were just sharing what you were sharing. That's what I see. I see a bunch of people competing to be lonelier.
Yeah. And that sounds like a sad place. I mean, there's a lot you can do up there, but do you really want to be alone in all of that?
Mm-hmm.
I sure wouldn't want to be.
No. You said one other thing that I'd love for you to speak on. The analogy because I hear a similar response in our groups of, hey, Roland, I like sex. I want to have a lot of sex. I want to have a diverse sexual experiences. The novelty, it's like, hey, Roland, the novelty feels so great. I like that feeling. And so, I've heard there are some addicts who they're 2 years into this, and they're like, man, why am I choosing to be in a relationship? Would I be better off just chasing and achieving these highs? And I always come back to a thing that I heard. And again, I'm not sure if this is a study that was actually done or if it's just kind of something that circles around the sex addiction community, but they speak to how an orgasm, a peak experience orgasm rivals the response to a direct line heroin injection. And again, I don't even know if they've done this, if there's a real study, if it's just something that people talk about. But I've never done heroin, but I hear it's pretty awesome, and so that's why I haven't done it because I don't think I want to have an experience. Apparently, it's so awesome that you want to do it again. So I have avoided trying it because who would want to do such a thing? But if you think about it, of course that feels great, right? Obviously, sex was designed to feel great. So just like this heroin addict does not need to chase those maximal peak experiences, there are other ways to experience a joyous life. That's always kind of my rebuttal to these sex addicts who are like, oh, well, I enjoy this, so why shouldn't I have it? The heroin addict enjoys heroin as well. And I think it's here's what I always say is, have you met anybody who wakes up and starts their day skydiving for breakfast? And they do it every day to chase that peak experience high. I'm sure there's somebody out there who probably does this nowadays. I could Google it, I guess. But my point is, that is a peak experience. But when I share that analogy, everyone always says, oh, Roland, that's stupid. But it's like, how stupid is it though? Is life about chasing peak experiences? Or is it about something else? And so, when we're comparing those two things, what do you use to substitute something so enjoyable as a novel sexual experience when compared to somebody who's saying, oh, well, I have to have sex with the same person for the rest of my life. And addicts do in early recovery, they struggle with something like this.
Yeah. So trying to think which direction to go with that. The brain chemistry or the other part.
Take them both.
Yeah. So the brain chemistry part is the dopamine seeking versus the serotonin, which is, so dopamine seeking, that's more of a peak. So what we're talking about right now is seeking out those peak experiences. There are definitely downsides to peak experiences. Is a lot of times when people are finished having the peak experience, depending on the experience, if it's something that's regrettable, if it's something that they really wanted to do, but afterwards they feel a lot of regret, they feel down on themselves, like in sex addiction, which is pretty darn common. You want to do what I call, excuse me, think through the drink.
Mm-hmm.
So think through the drink. Sorry, I got some congestion. It's really important to think, and I know it's not fun. It goes against the high. So I know there's resistance here to think through the drink, but it's a very important thing to do. Am I going to regret this experience later? Am I going to be able to look back and go, wow, that was really great. I don't have any regrets. I feel fine about it. It's a good experience. Or am I going to look back and go, wow, that was really another mess up, wasn't it? I really kind of regret that. Now I have another secret that I'm holding.
Mm-hmm.
Does that really feel good to me
Mm-hmm.
to have to hold that secret? Or would I rather be living in the real world where I can be my true self and be open and be honest? So when you do that dopamine seeking, if it's a neutral experience, meaning like it's something that's not going to harm you, it's not going to harm other people, that's fine. You know, if you like to go skiing, if you like to go snowboarding, go to Lake Tahoe. Lots of people are doing it. It's a great place to go if you like to do that. You won't catch me there, but I know lots of people that like to go. Too much adrenaline for me. But anyway, so it's important to be able to think through those things a little bit. Is this going to be something enjoyable that I'm not going to regret?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The other chemical, dopamine is the one we were just talking about, but serotonin, which is something that we get more of that experience that's more calm, more even, and more sustaining. Spending time with your family, again, not necessarily the same kind of high, but it can feel more sustaining. It can feel more life-giving, not having regrets. Again, that's one of the things I tend to go back to is when you're having these different experiences, are you having regret afterwards? Or does it feel like, hey, this was a good experience and I feel positive about it? At the end of the day, I think that's really going to make a difference in how you're going to end up feeling.
Yeah, the story, the way we always talk about it in our program is, I can't convince you your story's wrong if it's not wrong. And what I mean by that is, if you think having a perfect body with the six pack and then driving a $200,000 car to the gym and parking right in front of the main window so everybody can see you get out of your, the door opens up, scissor doors, and you get out of this car and you're looking fly. People will notice you and they will draw conclusions. I can't tell you that people will not assume that you are put together, dialed in, disciplined, and successful. I can't disagree with that, because in our society, a lot of people are going to draw that conclusion when you do something like that. So I can't compete with that story. I can't. And so I'm not even going to try. But I think sex addiction, very, very similarly, with sex addiction, it's not the exotic car or the perfect body. That's the byproduct. But there's a story that drives the byproduct. And so, in sex addiction, especially, a lot of men in my program, high achievers, they've participated in other activities, but a lot of their favorite activity is the conquest, right? It's the hunt. It's the, a lot of high achievers, they're very, very good at hunting for dopamine. And so, emotional affairs, for the men who have discovered it, they're a bit riskier because you can get caught, and there's some big ramifications when they're caught. But a lot of men find out that is actually a more effective dopamine tool than pornography and sex workers. The idea of having this partner who is falling in love with you, there's a lot more of a sustained dopamine release. You can even think about texting this partner or sending them a picture of yourself in the mirror, them sending a picture of you, and even the thought produces dopamine, and it hasn't even happened yet. And so what I'm getting at here is, what is the story you're playing for? Because as long as you're playing for dopamine, I can't really convince you to, this kind of goes back to your initial question that you answered in terms of, are you really recovering or not? And I think that's the challenge in early recovery is, if you're still playing for dopamine, if you're still playing for eyeballs and attention, and approval and validation, it's really difficult to disrupt your story of all these women lusting after you and this amazing car that turns heads at every intersection, and your six pack that everyone is envious of. It's hard to break that story because that's what you're playing for, and you're crushing it at that story. You're doing really, really good job. I think the question just is, what about the other story? And that's kind of where I was getting at here with the legacy. It seems to be going out of fashion, with this "I want it now" kind of generation that we're walking into. But really, legacy. To your point, will I regret this? In our program, I ask them to zoom out a little bit and rehumanize the situation. If that stripper's father, if you were a stripper and you were under 27, your dad had to accompany you to the strip club for the girl to do dance, would anyone go to the strip club if her father was there while you were throwing money at her? The answer is no. There's too much humanity being injected into the situation that our consciousness would feel yucky about it. She still has a father, though. And so I think that's a lot of it is when you change the story of, I want to make this world a better place. I don't want to make it unsafe for women. I don't want to create a world where these jobs even exist. And the truth is, as long as you are one more male participating, even in pornography, pornography is filmed prostitution. So if you are one more, you are perpetuating an industry where mothers and daughters are being paid paid or even forced into sex slavery to perform. And I think, in the absence of legacy, if nothing goes on past today, it's very, very easy to seek a peak experience. Just serotonin. For me, I call it peace and wholeness. Peace and wholeness is a very blunted emotion. It doesn't hold a candle to the peak experience, dopamine experience. It doesn't. Very different experiences. But I'll tell you this: you can experience peace and wholeness all day long, and look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day. And chasing peak experiences. It's tough to look at yourself in the mirror sometimes, depending on what that peak experience was, and to crawl into bed next to your wife who doesn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. How does that feel when you come in and lay down there next to her? Mm-hmm. What's going on in your head? Mm-hmm. Are you feeling connected? Are you feeling good about yourself? Are you feeling good about the day? Or do you feel like there's a 3-foot wall between you and her? Mm-hmm. That's another thing that I like to sometimes speak to, is that disconnection that's going to happen. It's inevitable. If you are acting out in these ways, even if it's only pornography, or if you've gone further and you've gone into prostitution and gone into affairs, how do you really feel about your, partner? How do you feel in her presence? And, you really got to be able to look in the mirror, just like you're saying. And do I feel okay about this at the end of the day? Do I not have regrets? That is so important.
So let's finish this conversation with integrity. So integrity, I have some feelings around integrity. I think, in the words thrown around in the public, it's often substituted for the honesty, right? So when someone hears the word integrity, the public assumes, okay, this is somebody who is honest, who tells the truth. And the two definitions are actually very, very, very different. If you look at the words, honesty is defined as it's free of deceit. Okay, so absent of lies or untruths, right? Integrity is different. It's a commitment to reality. Very, very different, very different definitions of the two words. Integrity being a commitment to, the way that we define it in the group is honesty is always telling the truth. Okay. Integrity is always seeking the truth. Another way of saying it would be it's a commitment to testing your truth for accuracy. And I think this is where I think, to me, if I had my light bulb moment, this is the first time I've ever actually shared this. I usually keep this to myself. But my light bulb moment that I find with addicts is that it's the commitment to reality. It's, how open to being wrong am I? How much time do I spend defending my version of the truth? Am I open to the concept that there is no truth, that truth is subjective? And I see the Christians tell the Buddhists that they're wrong, and I see the Buddhists tell the Christians that they're wrong. I see it all the time. Both feel like they have found the truth. So if everyone has a different version of the truth, why would yours be righter than anyone else's? Speak to your definition of integrity. How is it when it comes to sex addiction? Because it is a more difficult concept for a consciousness inhabiting a body in 2024 in a capitalist society. It's a harder concept to grasp, the fact that there are multiple versions of the truth. And so how does one live in integrity if that's the case?
Well, there's that. Yeah, that's a quote from M. Scott Peck about the commitment to reality at all costs. So I really like that quote. Sometimes you really have to make some changes in order to really make that commitment to truth. You have to pull away from that double life, because you can't really have those two lives be compatible. They're not compatible with each other. And so, as painful as it can be, I think it's like you need to be able to merge those worlds, not with everybody, of course, but with people that you're closest to, your partner especially, and yourself especially, is you want to be able to be the same person in these different places. Yeah, you play different roles, but you don't want to be completely, I guess the word I go to is incongruent.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be really incongruent, where you say this is good and that's good, but in the next moment you're actually doing just the opposite, which is something that happens a lot with people. Sometimes people in religious communities may find this happen even more often, when there's these struggles of, it's so important to be a certain way as opposed to live a certain way. Matter of fact, I literally was just reading something earlier today about you want to be the same person on Sunday as you are on Monday and Tuesday. Yeah, that was literally just this morning. I was reading about that, and I thought that was really good. Like, you don't want to be like a completely different person. You don't want to have to like completely change. We have different skills that we can bring out and different qualities that we can bring out in different situations, but we don't want to be like a completely different kind of person. It's too difficult. It's too complicated. Ultimately, life sucks when you're trying to juggle those realities. And at the end of the day, somebody asks you a question, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, which lie did I tell them?
Yeah. One of my mentors told me the nice thing about the truth is there's nothing to remember. I liked that. But no, you brought up a really interesting point. So I like the way you phrased it. Brad. When you're on this hunt for the truth, living in integrity, because for somebody, especially high achievers, to exactly what you've said, Brad, high achievers, being successful in business and marketing is about pleasing the person on the other side. And I think a lot of high achievers got into this very, very early. And so, they talk about a double life. Shoot, Brad, I think when my clients in my program, double, that's generous. I think they got 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 different lives that they can live. They're very, very, I call it shape shifting. I mean, they can become whatever they need to become in that situation. They can pick up on it very, very, very quickly. I always say their egos are very attuned to what is needed in that situation. But again, when you start living 60 lives, 70 lives, 80 lives, and you're spending so much time living all of them, and you've been doing it since you were 15 years old, how do you know which one's yours? I mean, that's my personal story. When I got it, recovery, I love recovery for, and I hate saying this in front of my wife because it was the worst thing that ever happened to her. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I hate saying that in front of her because it saved me and, really wrecked, it put her it changed her life, just as much as it changed mine. It was just not a great reason as much as for me. It was like finally the reality check I needed to delete the 75 identities that I had created and coming back to the one. But what I heard you say, Brad, was looking for conflicting truths. That's what I heard you say, right? Because we all have them, we all have them. I want to sleep with as many attractive women. I want as many attractive women to sleep with me as I can. And yet I want to be in a committed relationship to my wife, and she's the most wonderful person in the world. I want to grow old and die together. Those two oppose each other. And I think as a sex addict, I think you do have to clean house like that because how long, essentially you're a dry drunk, right? As long as you want to sleep with her, but you can't, how sustainable is that? Will be 10 years from now, will your rules change? When you're 75 and you're not a young looking person anymore and your wife doesn't look that young anymore, and you can pay a 25-year-old to sleep with you, will that become something that you want now because of where you're at? And I think that's the danger of a sex addict not completely cleaning house and living in integrity is, how many of these things do you still want to do, but you're not doing them because you're in a committed relationship? To me, that's sobriety, not recovery. You're finding a way to not do it, but you haven't truly changed your moral compass in a sense of seeing the flaws in that argument. So I think, did I hear that right? Kind of hunting for conflicting truths. This one can't be true if this one's true, and you have to pick. Another way of saying, I read this book, which is a phenomenal book. I love it. If you haven't read it, Brad, you should read it. It really doesn't have to do with addiction, but it's a really great book. It's called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Berkman. And it's more of a professional development book, kind of targeted more towards business people, but not really. He's really talking about the mental decision of how we use time. And, for him, he finds it really funny, this new phrase called FOMO. Right? The fear of missing out. And he says it's kind of insane when you really think about it, because he said you can only be in one place at one time. So if you go to Santorini and you're at EO watching the sunset in Santorini in Greece, you can't be in Portugal for the big, New Year's parade. You just physically can't because you're in Greece. And so he said it's interesting to him when he hears the FOMO, because you must pick. And the one you pick, you will miss out on everything else. That's my favorite analogy of showing kind of conflicting truths is they both can't be true. And so you do have to pick. And I think that's where, the debate comes between, do I pick a peak experience and do I hang on to losing those peak experiences, or do I hang on to something more sustainable, sensing serotonin, right? Peace, wholeness, and a sense of legacy.
Yeah. It's a decision. It's an important decision to make. Sometimes it's not an easy decision, but it's really important, excuse me, to be living in consultation. That's why the groups, I think, are so important, is especially in beginning recovery, where your addict is still really strong and really powerful, is you really need to be with people that understand what you're going through, understand your experiences, and can help you. They've been there. You're going to find people that are behind you. You're going to find people that are ahead of you in the process of healing. And you can seek out those people that are ahead of you. You can even, if you, sometimes just being in the meetings and in whatever kind of meetings you're going to in recovery, you want to look for the difficulties. If you hear somebody sharing difficulties and pain, you can resonate with that. You can listen to that. You can hear that. You can have potentially empathy for that because of your own experience. And on people that are doing really well, you can go, oh, well, that sounds good. I'd like to be able to have that kind of integrity and feel really good within my own skin. So I think that's one of the things you can do to really help yourself, definitely, in pulling away from the conflicting truths, being more congruent, being more okay with maybe a little bit less adrenaline. Not zero, I know, but to not rely so much on that. Again, with experiences that you don't want to be repeating, the ones that you regret. Having a great time, going out to dinner, going to the slopes, maybe even going on a helicopter ride. There's lots of things that you can do which can be fun and exciting and enjoyable. But if to me, my own experiences from earlier in my life was that I had some really nice experiences growing up, but who I was with made a bigger difference than what I was doing. And I actually remember that kind of clearly from a few experiences I had growing up. Sometimes you go to this really nice place and having all of these things going on, and it's really like a really expensive restaurant or a really great place you're going to. And it's like, well, but if you're not there with somebody who you really like to be with and you enjoy and you feel connected with, it's not really nearly as good of an experience.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
The with groups, I find, if you find a group of men you respect and admire who are like you, who have found sustainable peace, wholeness, who have dropped the peak experiences and prefer peace, wholeness, and legacy, prefer it. To your point, really listening to their new truth and how they got it. Sometimes hearing that truth from them, to me, it's, that's one of the limitations to one-on-one conversations is one person's experience. But yeah, you have a group of 10 people and they all share their truth. Now you get to pick, which one do I like better? It's this beauty of the mastermind effect, right? And the other thing that I say too is there's something special, Brad, that happens. It's very easy to defend your delusion to yourself. But when you write the same delusion down that you were convicted, you wrote it down, you said, you know what, I like that and I want to do that and there's nothing wrong, and you can write all that down. I tell you this though, grab that same piece of paper, stand in front of a group of 9 other men and try to get those words out of your mouth. There's something human in you that won't be able to say it. You will just feel so stupid being, and that, I think that's the power of connection. That's why I say, the most powerful tool that we have against addiction is connection, especially with other addicts. When I see those guys, the conviction goes away, and all of a sudden they go to read this paper really of things that they believe, and they can't get it out of their mouth. And I think to me, it's this unspoken humanness in us that knows we're full of shit. And it's those moments where you're like, okay, I've got something to learn. So, hey, in our last few seconds together, can you tell us about, most of everyone listening to this in our group is married. You have something coming down here pretty soon. Can you talk to us about that and kind of some of the results that people can expect?
Yeah. So this class that I teach called Help Her Heal, which is based on the work of Carol Jurgensen Sheets. Really great work. Something that a lot of people in addiction recovery really struggle with is not only are they dealing with their own things, of course, but they're dealing with their partner who is just devastated. And not only does she need to, or they need to be able to get help, but you need to be able to be there for her as much as possible. And sometimes addicts really struggle with seeing, okay, well, yeah, I guess what I did wasn't very good. I guess it's kind of regrettable, but can't she like stop complaining already? I
Get
mean,
over it.
I really like roll my eyes when I hear that, but it happens. You're in your own skin and you're not very well connected to your partner anymore. So you're having a hard time with empathizing and understanding what she's experiencing. And this class is specifically for that, to help you to be able to make those connections of understanding her better and what she's going through and how you can help her. So really important, great work. I was going to just kind of comment a little bit on the kind of things that I talk about in brief in that class.
Yeah, I would say there's a time,
yeah.
a lot of the guys listening to this know this already, but there's an expiration date on relationships. You need to get your shit together. I would say, man, it's inside of a year. I mean, you need to, there is a point that if you haven't figured it out by then, it becomes, I've seen people still save it, but man, I would say if you haven't figured it out, I would say ideally before the first 6 months from discovery. If you haven't cracked into what Brad's talking about, oh man, it can really be a significant setback. So there is an expiration date on this, and you want to get right on it. But what were you saying, Brad?
Learning to, and it is a learning process. If you don't really have empathy, it may be that it's something new for you to even experience something like empathy. So if you haven't experienced it, it's going to be harder to give it. So we're going to be giving you tools on how to give that. To be able to tolerate it when she's having triggers, she's having difficulty. She might be crying her eyes out. She could be yelling. It's any and all those emotions are going to be coming up, and you need to be able to tolerate it. And I'm going to give you tools on how to tolerate that and how to still be there for her. Shame, of course, is going to be something that's going to come up when she's talking to you or asking you questions. And you need to be able to deal with that as well. And you can begin to have healthy rituals together. A check-in process is certainly something we encourage people to be able to do. We do discuss that to some extent. Ultimately, the biggest goal is to be able to slowly rebuild damaged trust. Restoration of trust is really vital to be able to save your relationship. And that's a big part of what we're going to be doing in this is
and it
when you're
can
showing
come back.
empathy.
I know there's a lot of people who think, that it can't return. I'll be honest with you. It looks quite different than it did before all this went down. So I can't say you're going to get back to where you were. But you do get it back. It just looks different. It's very, it's a bit more mechanical, but it does come back. It does come back. And this course is in the workbook are a very valuable tool for that. But Brad, thanks for your time today. You're a smart dude. Your experience is very, very much appreciated. If people are to get a hold of you, is the easiest thing to just visit the website?
Yeah, you can visit the website. And if you mention that you heard this through Roland, you're going to get to only pay $600 for the 12 weeks instead of $650, which is what you see on the class. So just make sure that you mention where you heard about it.
Great.
And we'll make those adjustments. So yeah, it's available to anybody in the country.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Brad. I
All right.
appreciate your time so much. We will put that link to the site here in the bottom of the video for those of you who want to take advantage of this opportunity. Brad, thanks again. This was really, really fun. I very, very much appreciate your time. And I got a feeling we'll probably be doing this again soon.
All right. Thanks, Roland. Appreciate it.
Yes. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.